Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome to another edition of Behind the Curtain. I'm Jack Berkman. Remember, I'm not a reporter. I'm not even a talk show host. I'm a lobbyist. I walk the halls of Congress 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. We're at the parties, the galas, the balls, K Street happy hours. We're getting you fresh information every day of the week, information you can't get on any cable news channel, but you'll get it here. What a show. It's a shame we only have an hour. We'll be talking about the shakeup in the Justice Department, the battle with Jim Acosta at the White House. Yes, he's no longer the CNN White House correspondent because he got into a fight with an intern, a young girl, fighting over a microphone. Not CNN's finest moment. Then we'll be talking about the recent shooting in Ventura, California, Thousand Oaks. We'll be talking all about that and how to resolve these situations and how to get a better handle on preventing these shootings and what we need to do. But first up, Hans van Spakovsky, attorney and former member of the FEC, manager of the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Institute, and a senior legal fellow in Heritage Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Hans, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Well, I'll get your name right before the end of the show, but let's plunge into justice. Now, I wasn't surprised. Well, the surprise I have is that Sessions lingered on so long. I certainly see the obvious political wisdom of firing him right after the election. But had I been Trump, I would have canned Sessions long ago. And for that matter, why is Rosenstein still there? Now, we know why Mueller is still there because, Trump doesn't want the political fallout of firing Mueller and all that. That may happen or Mueller may wrap up or whatever, but Trump doesn't want to get into all that stuff. But I don't understand this business of Rod Rosenstein still there. And why did he wait so long to fire Sessions?
Well, I suspect, the first thing to say about Sessions is that apart from the conflict that Sessions had with the president over the Mueller special counsel investigation, and what clearly was behind all this was the president was mad at Sessions for having recused himself from the very beginning and thus giving control and supervision over the investigation to Rod Rosenstein, who's the number 2 there. But Sessions did so many other good things, so many other areas. It's important to keep that in mind. But look at it this way. As you know, prior to the election, Republicans had only a slight margin in the U.S. Senate, only 1 or 2 votes when it comes to confirming executive branch officials. And it's highly likely that if Sessions had been fired prior to the election, it could have been very difficult for the president to get a replacement confirmed because just losing 1 or 2 Republican votes would mean no confirmation. Waiting until after the election on the gamble, which paid off, and the projection that the Republicans would gain more seats and therefore there's a bigger vote margin makes it now easier for him to
confirm the new AG. But of course, you could have just left the temporary attorney general in there. He could have Whitaker in there as a temporary. He could have had Whitaker in there as a temporary replacement way back in August. And if the Senate doesn't confirm him, just leave him as acting AG. That might be what I would have done.
Well, except that under the Federal Vacancies Act, and that's the law that the president just used to appoint Whitaker, the appointment is limited to 210 days, 7 months.
Well, that's true, but you can always have the guy. The president can always install the guy you want because, if necessary, you after Whitaker you get somebody else, right? You can always control the departments, even if that's in the way. You can always. I see your point, but you could always have the guy you want, right? You just bring in Whitaker's chief of staff. You can always have the same mindset there, right?
You can. I just think I suspect. Look, I don't know. I don't have any inside knowledge. But I suspect they wanted to wait to see what the election did because it would give them a bigger margin of victory. How long Rod Rosenstein will last, I don't know. I suspect it won't be that long. If he had been fired, though, since Sessions had recused himself, if Rosenstein had been fired, you would have had a real problem in supervision of Bob Mueller. Why? Well, because then it would drop down to the number 3
the solicitor SG
slot, the associate attorney general, and that slot has been empty for months.
And then where would it go? Then it goes to the solicitor general, who's 4.
Yeah, I think it might have gone to the SG then, but the problem was that all these upper echelon positions within the Justice Department have been unfilled for quite a long time because of
the number 3, that woman whose name I forget, woman.
Rachel Brand.
Yeah, woman was there. She left. She got out of there.
Correct.
You're right. It's vacant. I see. I get it. Okay, I got that. But, Rod Rosenstein, for all the trouble, all the problems, my thinking on this for some time, there are all these allegations about how Rosenstein is the epicenter of the deep state and this, that, and the other. Do you think he had something on Trump? Do you think I can't figure out how he got the job to begin with. 2, I still don't see a lot of logic in his staying there. None of it makes a whole lot of sense to me. I wonder how any of this came to be in the first place. Do you think he has something on the Donald?
No, I don't think so. I don't know who initially recommended him. It's we should remember that he was first a political appointee in the prior Bush administration, so I assume they thought he would be a good choice and could be trusted to make the right decisions once he got in there. But I don't know who initially recommended him.
I wonder, so many of these people are Bush family people, Rod Rosenstein, Bob Mueller, others. I wonder if Bush father and son had something to do behind the scenes with luring Trump into picking some of these people. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know that anything like that has happened. My understanding is that certainly George W. Bush, the last Bush president, that he's basically retired and isn't doing really anything politically, not even. Look at the difference between him and Barack Obama in just this past election. Barack Obama was everywhere raising money, endorsing candidates, giving speeches. You didn't see anything like that from George W.
That's true. That's a very good point. We haven't seen W on the campaign trail. I don't think I've seen him on the campaign trail since he left office, maybe once. I think I can think of one time in the 10 years since W left office where he has campaigned for anyone, and it was in Texas.
That's right. And he's pretty much abandoned the field in his retirement. Barack Obama has not.
And neither has Bill Clinton. And I guess George Bush is true to his word. That's what he said. W is true to his word. That's what he said. Okay, so where do we see this going at Justice with Whitaker now? What will Whitaker do? So now he's the manager of Mueller. What are the implications for the Mueller investigation? Is there truth to rumors that Trump will fire Mueller like December 24th and let the story die into the Christmas holiday? What do you think?
I don't know anything about that rumor. The news reports are that supposedly Mueller has started writing his final report, which will basically summarize his investigation. If that's true, keep in mind that up until today, none of the indictments that he has released have had anything to do whatsoever with the original mandate he was given.
I couldn't agree more, with the possible exception of those 12 Russians whom we don't even, in Russia, who obviously won't be extradited, and more to the point, we don't even know that they exist.
Yeah, that's right. And even in those indictments, if you read them, which I did when they came out,
how un-Washington of you to actually read something, Hans. Come on. Come now. How quaint.
I mean, he goes to great trouble. The indictments go to great trouble to point out that these Russians who were indicted went to great lengths to disguise themselves as Americans so that no one here in any of the campaigns would have any idea that they were dealing with Russians.
All right, hold that thought, Hans. Hold that thought. We'll be back with Hans on the other side of the break, ladies and gentlemen. Hans, hang on. Right back with you.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Continuing now with our friend Hans, talking about the new Attorney General, the shakeup, what's coming next with the Mueller investigation, and the whole saga at DOJ. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. That is, if you have an issue that no one will talk about and you need to bring it to power brokers in Washington to deal with, you call us 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. jackberkman2016 at Gmail. We're coming into the 20th century, never the 21st, at least probably not for a few more decades. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family, never quit on the city of Washington, never quit on this nation. We will find the killer or killers of Seth. More on Lucanon coming. We're trying to get Lucanon to come out. Luke is not his real name, but we're working on that, and we'll know more shortly. Hans, welcome back.
Like I said, thanks for having me on the program.
Now, a pleasure is all ours. Now, we were talking, you were making a good point when we cut you off about those 12 Russians Mueller indicted, and I said we don't even know if they exist, and you were making a point, and I cut you off. Please continue.
Well, the point simply was that when you read the indictments, Mueller makes it very clear that no one in the United States had any idea about what these Russians were doing. There was no contact with campaigns, particularly the Trump campaign. This was a disinformation operation that the Russians were conducting that, frankly, isn't any different than from the kind of disinformation campaigns that the Russians and the KGB ran throughout the entire Cold War. The only difference is that they've moved into using social media to try to do it.
Have you studied the issue of the email? Have you studied the issue of the release of the release of the DNC emails in the summer of 2016? Have you followed those trails? Have you studied that issue?
I have, and while there are reports out claiming that this was done by Russian hacking, getting into the DNC and doing it, again, there's no evidence that anyone in the United States was involved in this.
Now, what is it? Okay, so I guess there are various theories. One is that the leaking came from the Russians. The other is that the Russians got them and then leaked to WikiLeaks, and then they were leaked through. I guess they were leaked through WikiLeaks. The other theory is that Seth Rich gave them to the Russians or gave them to WikiLeaks, and then they were leaked. There's 6 or 7 theories about all of this stuff, and now we enter my friend Roger Stone, who's been under investigation by Mueller's been investigating him apparently for north of 2 years now. And the Washington Post continues to report he'll be indicted. He's never been indicted. But what's going on now? Let's bring in the curious case of Roger Stone. What is Mueller chasing Stone for?
That is hard to understand. As it
is.
Stone,
Mueller's put a lot of resources into chasing Stone, though. It's a massive federal investigation.
Well, because I think at some point he said that he knew something about the DNC hacking and how that information got out. So I assume that's why Mueller has. Well,
there was an email between Stone and Assange in jail, or not jail, in the embassy in London. He's in the embassy in London, the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Apparently, Stone emailed him once, and that email was recovered with a warrant. And I suppose so that email is now the basis of Mueller's investigation into Stone.
Yeah, and I suspect, look, the way federal prosecutors get you when they can't actually prove that you have violated a substantive criminal law is they go after you for supposedly lying to investigators about what you did. When they prosecute you under that statute for lying about something that you did, and what you did, the underlying action was perfectly legal, that is an abuse of that is an abuse of the law, and a way for the prosecutor to say, well, we couldn't actually indict you for any kind of real violation of the law, but we're going to get you anyway.
And the whole Mueller investigation is that. I mean, that's basically what they have Flynn. That's what they got Gates. That's what the Manafort's a different case altogether. He's being prosecuted for crimes that don't have anything to do with anything, just lobby forms and all that stuff, and tax crimes and offshore tax crimes. There's nothing to do with any of this. And now. So there's not a lot. If I were Mueller, I wouldn't want to be writing that report because I think it's going to be very difficult. All you can highlight are those 12 Russians. And as you say, we don't know if they're involved. We don't even know if they exist. And certainly not one will be extradited.
That's right. And don't forget, still outstanding, we're still waiting for the latest report from the Inspector General of the Justice Department. Because remember, he's looking at the claims that have been made that when the FBI started this entire investigation by applying to the secret FISA court and getting an electronic surveillance warrant that they used against members of the Trump campaign, that they actually abused that statute, didn't have a factual basis for applying for a warrant, but instead were relying on the unsubstantiated, unconfirmed hearsay allegations made in the Steele dossier.
One of the first things
is looking at that.
One of the first things that President Berkman would do, and I don't know if you agree with me, is refuse to sign any appropriations bill that contained one further dollar for the FISA court. This idea of secret courts, that's Henry VIII, it's Adolf Hitler, it's Joseph Stalin, it shouldn't be America. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree to the extent of the fact that if it's used for what it was supposed to be, and it's not supposed to be used to surveil American presidential campaigns, what it's supposed to be used for is to go after espionage and potential terrorism when you can't publicize the fact that you've got a secret.
Yeah, but see, you see the problem with that. Henry VIII had rationale for Star Chamber, too. They had rationale they put out in those days, too. You understand? There's always a rationale for a secret court, right? You never know you're in the moment when you're in the moment. There's always a logical rationale to toss out, right?
I agree. What I do think is that we need to look at the safeguards and restrictions that have been put into the process and onto the court to make sure that try to make sure as much as we can that it's not abused.
So where do you see this going? So Hans, I want your predictions. You know this subject matter as well as anybody. Let's make predictions. What do you think where does Whitaker go at justice? How long do you think Mueller goes? What happens to Rosenstein? Time for predictions.
I believe Rosenstein is going to resign or leave fairly soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens before the end of the year. Whitaker, despite all the claims that he supposedly wasn't lawfully appointed, he was under federal law. He will stay in that position until President Trump nominates a new attorney general. And, I think there might be a possibility that it might be Whitaker himself being nominated by the president. And I think the Mueller investigation, if it's correct that he started writing his report, I suspect that's going to wind up, hopefully, if not by the end of the year, by early next year.
I'm amazed with all this stuff. I mean, what is this? Explain to me, what is the controversy over Whitaker? I mean, obviously the president controls the Justice Department. Why do they say he's not? I don't understand. Why do they suggest he's not lawfully appointed?
The claim is that because the Attorney General, that's a position that has to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, that naming somebody temporarily into that position violates that appointments clause because he's not confirmed by the Senate. But the critics are wrong. The Supreme Court looked at this issue back in 1898, if you can believe it,
wow,
and issued a decision saying that it's okay. The president has the power to temporarily appoint an acting individual to carry out the duties of what would otherwise be a Senate-confirmed position.
And indeed, the statute you're referring to references 270 days, so Congress itself has de facto blessed it by suggesting it can last for 270 days, right?
That is exactly right. Congress has granted the president that authority, too. So the folks that are criticizing this really, I don't think, have a legal leg to stand on.
All right, I'm going to try here. Hans von Spakovsky. Did I get it?
More like Tchaikovsky.
Oh, God. Attorney and former member of the FEC, manager of the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Institute. Boy, our election law certainly needs reformed. You have your work cut out in that regard. Thank you, Hans. If we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. We'll stay tuned. Coming up next, we're going to get into the Jim Acosta saga. Wait till you learn more about our friend Jim.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail, coming finally into at least the 20th century. Now remember, same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit. 703-795-5364. Joining us now, David Shestokas, constitutional attorney, former prosecutor, author of Constitutional Soundbites and Creating the Declaration of Independence. David, welcome.
It's great to be with you today, Jack.
Well, this saga, I'll tell you, of all the ways in which CNN itself has made national news and headlines in the last 2 years, and there have been many, this thing with Acosta takes the cake. What's your take on this?
Well, I've read the lawsuit, and as far as CNN as a plaintiff goes, they have no basis for making any complaints whatsoever.
I mean, I guess the question, how can they sue? I mean, obviously the president has a right to control who he credentials and who he doesn't in the press room. If they don't like it, they can go report in Lafayette Park, right? I mean, so what do they, I guess the lawsuit is just for publicity. I mean, obviously CNN's law firm told them that, right?
Well, it's very interesting because typically, because Ted Olson is one of their attorneys, and Ted Olson is typically handles matters for Republicans. It's very unusual that Mr. Olson would be in on this.
Well, but Ted flipped. Ted's flipped. Ted goes both ways. He's flipped, because remember he did gay marriage. He's argued a lot of liberal causes too. Ted's flipped over the years. He's a very moderate Republican at best.
At best.
He's changed.
But from that standpoint, yeah, it's clearly a publicity matter. As far as CNN as a plaintiff goes, okay, CNN has no business being in court on this basis. They have there's been no violation of their freedom of the press. They have 50 other reporters besides Acosta that hold these hard passes that give people access to the White House grounds and the White House press briefing room. CNN has no complaint themselves whatsoever.
So CNN now enlighten us. So Trump has not thrown CNN out of the White House press room. He's just thrown Acosta out. So CNN can, if they choose, and I don't know if they have, can they send another reporter?
Absolutely. They've got at least 50 other reporters with qualified press credentials that allow them into the White House press briefings, that allow them to the other privileges that go with the hard pass, not having to give security warnings 24 hours in advance, et cetera. CNN has no complaints themselves as an organization whatsoever.
Now, but had they sent another reporter, or are they deliberately making a point?
It would appear they're making a point to whether or not they've actually sent anybody. And, of course, they only filed the lawsuit yesterday. So whether they've sent anybody there today or not, I'm unaware. But they certainly have the ability to send somebody besides Acosta.
So what is this? I mean, Acosta is very good at making news for himself and getting publicity for himself. He's been good at that his whole life. Is that what this is really about? I mean, he could have given away the mic. He didn't have to fight that girl over the microphone. He could have handed it to her. Do you think he had that in mind as he did this?
Well, it certainly appears that he had that in mind. It appears as though he tried to push the edge of the envelope. He's always pushed it in certain respects, but this time he actually did get physical. I've seen 4 or 5 different renditions of the tape, and it's quite clear that he did, in fact, take his left arm and sort of karate chop the White House intern.
Now, of course, seeing it, now I agree with you entirely, but seeing this, I'll play devil's advocate, seeing it from the other side. Now, that intern, of course, there's no real harm in letting Acosta hold the microphone another 15 seconds, right? I mean, I guess now I can see where Trump would train those girls to do that sort of thing, but he likes aggressive New Yorkers, et cetera, et cetera. But just playing devil's advocate, there's no harm in letting Acosta ask one more question. If Trump doesn't want to answer the question, he can just call on someone else.
Well, I would suggest that Trump tried to call on other people, and Acosta really was interfering with that. There's 150 other reporters in the room, not just Acosta. Certainly, the press pass doesn't give him the right to the mic from that standpoint, and to physically maintain the mic. I suggest has some bearing on the situation regarding the press pass, because, of course, the press pass itself is not something anybody's entitled to. Sort of like a driver's license, though. If you meet certain appropriate requirements and the government issues it to you, then if the government wants to take it away, there's, generally speaking, a procedure to be followed. And the lawsuit regarding the Fifth Amendment claim regarding Acosta does have some merit, because Fifth Amendment is the one that provides due process of law in the event that the government cares to interfere with somebody's life, liberty, or property. And in this situation, there is in fact a property interest that has been attached to possession of that pass. And so there's a process that I would suggest Acosta's entitled to. There's a process involved with issuing it that involves if somebody is denied such a pass, that they're entitled to have a written reason for the denial, and then they have 30 days to contest.
Now, is that part of the lawsuit? Is CNN just suing on First Amendment grounds, or is that claim that you just stated there also part of the lawsuit, the details and mechanics of the seizure of the press pass?
The details and the mechanics of the seizure of the press pass are also included in the lawsuit. There's a Fifth Amendment claim for due process. And on that ground, Acosta himself personally has a claim, because they don't issue a press pass to CNN generally. They issue it to individual reporters personally.
But the president, as you say, the president, though, when you say due process, the president, okay, they issued the pass, but doesn't the president have the right to revoke at will any pass he wants? I mean, does the president have a legal obligation to go through any process?
In this instance, I suggest that he does. As to Acosta personally, not as to CNN. CNN shouldn't even have their name on the caption. They shouldn't even be involved. But as to Acosta, the analogy of a driver's license is sort of like that. In fact, you're not entitled to a driver's license, but once you follow the rules to get it, if the government wants to take it away, then in fact they have to follow prior established procedures.
I guess the question becomes what rights though are conferred by that pass? That pass doesn't necessarily give you a right to enter the presidential briefing room. It may just give you what rights does it confer specifically?
There's a specific ability to have access to the White House and other presidential events without going through pre-screening. Generally speaking, if a reporter doesn't have this hard pass, they have to give 24 hours notice that they would like to come and things like that. Gives you access. Doesn't give you the right to have the mic. From that standpoint, doesn't give you the right to have the microphone. It gives you simply the right to be there and go through less rigorous screening than somebody that does not have that pass.
It's like House of Cards. This is all because it's like House of Cards. I'm a number of us here are House of Cards aficionados. Are you a House of Cards watcher?
I've watched it all.
I watched it 3 times. You remember when Seth, the White House press secretary, throws out Isla, the Arab reporter there. Remember when he throws her out and they bring in Kate and all that stuff? This is an exact replay of all of that.
Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that they can't revoke it. But it does mean that if they do revoke it, they need to follow the procedures that are outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations.
Let me ask you this now. Is CNN a winner or a loser in all of this? I'm tending to think they're a winner because they bolster they've thrown in their lot with the left. I mean, they're not even pretending to be a legitimate, balanced news organization anymore, right? So their friends in the establishment media love this. The Washington Post, the Times, all of this is bolstering the stature of CNN in their community, right?
Within their community, there's a good chance that that's taking place. I don't know that that's necessarily the case with the American people. We're like so much of what they do, because clearly I don't think people like seeing the president abused by a reporter, as apparently Acosta determined that he's going to do.
Do you see the White House? Who's trying to promote this the most? Is the White House trying to drive this issue, or is CNN trying to drive the issue? Who's pushing this right now in terms of the PR battle?
Well, it appears that both of them seem to think that for their own personal constituencies, they both seem to feel that they're going to be winners in certain respects. Because I don't think people like the lack of decorum that Acosta generally sends. But as you mentioned, CNN has a different constituency, and they're certainly appealing to their constituency.
Yeah, Acosta really has gotten, he's pushed it. He's become, and again, this is probably because CNN wants to do it and his world is cheering him on. He has become more militant under Trump. I mean, he's smart enough to know that he's bringing a militancy and an ideological bent to reporting that shouldn't be there. I'm sure he knows that. But I think a lot of what he's done in the last 2 years has been quite deliberate. Do you agree?
Oh, it's quite deliberate. It's quite deliberate. It's deliberate to make himself the story rather than the president's becoming the story. It's quite deliberate. It seems to be that it was quite deliberate that he challenged the president when the president told him to sit down, and he recognized another reporter. And it's surprising actually that many other reporters are kind of like on his team, because of course he monopolizes their time, gets in their way of doing their jobs. He interferes with the smooth, orderly flow of business during a press conference.
David Shestokas, constitutional lawyer, former prosecutor, author of Constitutional Soundbites and Creating the Declaration of Independence. Thank you so much. We'd love to have you back again. Coming up next, school shootings, other shootings, and what do we do to stop and prevent them? Stay tuned.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Why don't you get a toupee with some brains in it?
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family, never quit on the city of Washington, and never quit on this nation until we find the killer or killers of Seth. Our investigation at the Profiling Investigative Center is ongoing, and it will continue. Joining us now, Adam Coughran, president of Safe Kids and founder of the HERO, HERO program. Adam, a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours, let me assure you. Okay, the recent shooting, Ventura County, Thousand Oaks. This seems to be getting worse and worse. Is this normal for a society of this size? In other words, are there just so many nuts and you have this stuff going on? Do you see a trend toward this getting worse? Let's first, before we get to solutions, assess the problem. How do you see the problem?
I see the problem as a little bit of both. I mean, we do have a increasingly large society. But the worrisome thing is the acts of mass violence is increasing, and it's increasing beyond proportionally what the increase in population is. While you've always had people that have been angry or upset or fight or, commit acts of violence, these types of active shooters of mass violence, of multiple casualties, is growing at an alarming rate.
And so you see a trend beyond just population growth. My business partner said, we were discussing this the other day, ironically, and I said, boy, this is terrible. Things are getting worse. He said, well, you have to remember the U.S. population has doubled since 1968. Since the time I was born, America's twice as large. If it's twice as large, you have twice as many madmen, twice as many killings, right? But what you're saying is that's not true. At least some of it's true. But you see a trend toward just more shooting generally, demography aside.
Correct. And so, when we talk about the mass violence, what we haven't really seen until the last 20, 25 years is people going in and shooting multiple people or hurting multiple people at one time or in one place. While we've had violence and we see the proportionate increase of violence, as your partner said, with the increase in violence, this is really kind of off to the side. It's like an anomaly. In that we have people 5, 6, 12, 20 people being killed at a time in what really amounts to an act of mass violence or an act of terror.
So a lot of this, to what extent then, I guess the next logical question, to what extent is this driven by cable news? In other words, maybe we have this trend because these sick people see themselves as celebrities like a la Charlie Manson. To what extent is this being driven by the fact that we now cover shootings on all channels 24 hours a day, whereas even 20 years ago, we didn't do that. A lot of it was treated more as a local news story. Now, every shooting that involves 2 or more people is a national news story.
Right. And I think some of that is really due to the 24-hour news cycle. News outlets have to put something on all the time. They have to have a story all the time. But aside from that, it is more shocking. If you had someone who maybe went down and someone was, let's say, shot or stabbed at the local market, very much local news. But just the shock to the conscience of 12 people dead, 20 people dead is really a national news story. And you're always going to have the copycats. You're always going to have those that watch what happens and say, I can do that, or I could do that better. This particular shooting is even more disturbing because he actually, in a social media post, made reference to that in quoting that hopes and prayers and keep me in your thoughts is what people say every time. And you wonder why these things keep happening. So he starts to really reference some of that news coverage and some of the social media coverage around
So
it.
you see directly these psychos are clearly being driven by that. Okay, let me ask you this. Let's talk about solutions for this. And this is really the big part of all of this. What can we do? What should we do? I, for a long time, have been a proponent of really arming the society. I think we need armed guards in schools, in churches, in synagogues, everywhere. I think the best way to stop a shooter is to have armed people waiting, take the Second Amendment to its ultimate conclusion. I think that's the best. What say you?
Well, that can definitely be a part of the solution. There's no what we would say, magic bullet, so to speak. It is really multiple parts of the equation. One is, of course, at certain locations that would be volatile, such as schools and churches, that you have people that are prepared for the worst. And whether that means having police officers there, whether that means having armed security, that's a portion of it. But you now run the risk of how militarized do we feel going to church or going to school. And we've even seen those who have been armed, whether they've been police officers or security, not always able to respond in a short amount of time. It might take a minute or two to cross a large campus or to cross a large church. And there can be chaos and pandemonium in that time. It's really what I believe is really a holistic approach. We look at obviously protecting these locations through security and different measures. We look at the mental health component of it. We look at people realizing what some of these behavioral signs are beforehand to help get these people some help or to stop them before some of these attacks occur. It's really a multi-pronged approach.
I guess, what can you do? I mean, the best police, like the police in Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, when the terrible shooting at the synagogue, they responded very well. I think the police got high marks, but still, how quickly can they respond? Even if they respond in 4 or 5 minutes or less, the shooting's over, right? So there's very little. Even the best police department in the country can only respond in a few minutes, and it only takes 2 or 3 minutes for the entire shooting. Or less. It can take 1 minute. So, as you say, a police response is very difficult.
It is. And as much as I hate to say it, it's really starting to become incumbent upon the citizens, the people, to have an idea and a plan for their own and for their family. Should something occur, from the time that person opens fire to the time that someone can get there to stop it, whether it's the people in the scenario or the police, what is their plan? What should they be doing? What should be the response?
As you suggest, maybe like part of the solution, just as you suggest, is self-policing, whereas schools need to do a better job. Which kids are a little loony, and how do we watch them? How do we help them? Can they be prevented? Should we detain them somehow? Churches need to be aware of, do we have any loony members here? Are there people exerting loony behavior, etc.? Maybe everybody needs to be on the lookout. If you live in a condo building, are there loonies that live here? Do we know there's loony? Let's watch them. Maybe we all need to become more watchful.
And that's exactly what we did right after the September 11th attacks. The government coined "see something, say something." And I think still to this day, it's never been more relevant in your neighbors, in the people that you associate with, in family members, even in friends. The people that have the most contact with these folks know something is wrong. There's some sign, or there's something that we know is wrong. And it's going either unreported or it's going unhelped for these other people to stop whatever it is that they may be planning.
Is there a public responsibility of the cable news channels generally, to get together and say, look, we're going to report the news, of course, but we're not going to dramatize it. We're not going to have music. For these shootings, CNN and MSNBC and Fox, they all have their own little music. They have music for war, music for shooting, music for soap opera. I mean, they dramatize it, right? They've got music for school shootings. I mean, maybe they need to stop doing that.
I think you have a great point in so far as it becomes an event. And these shootings, much like, the coverage of political elections, there's music and background. School shootings.
CNN hired someone to do musical score. They hired someone to develop musical score specifically for different kinds of shootings. I mean, I don't want to say that's sick, but that's pretty sick. Holy cow.
And, it drives ratings to some degree because people are so fascinated with this problem in America. And I think you make a great point. If we can really tone down some of the sensationalism and the stardom that some of these people get, either if they survive the event or post their death in the event, these are names that are synonymous. We can name the Columbine shooters. We can name, some of these shooters throughout history. And why they should not, in my mind, be a celebrity.
I mean, part of it is if you have some derelict living on the street, some guy that's basically a hobo, and all of a sudden he can be famous. I mean, in his twisted mind, why shouldn't I do this? I'm starving to death anyway. Why not be famous on TV? I think that's the way a lot of these people think.
Well, a lot of them have a grievance of some sort. For someone to wrap their mind around hurting a lot of people, there's a grievance. They feel they've been victimized. They feel they have nothing else to lose. There's something that has turned in their mind that has allowed them to want to do this and make it okay with themselves to eventually become a celebrity or to hurt a bunch of people and to become infamous to some degree. So you're right. What do they have to lose? And now I'm getting back at society for whatever the feeling is that I've been wronged.
Adam Coughran, president of Safe Kids, founder of the HERO, H-E-R-O program. Adam, if we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. Thank you so much. Well, remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364, taking your emails, jackberkman2016@gmail, jackberkman2016@gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit. Remember, even when we're not on the air, you can hear us and see us. You read all about us at jackberkmanradio.com and, of course, always at radioamerica.com. Thanks. We'll see you next week.